Welcome to Comic Book Ruminations, a podcast where we take deep dives into the themes, history, and lasting impact of classic and modern comic book stories. This episode, nobody's favorite superhero, the New 52, and Aquaman's old woes, a poignant look at the public's shallow impressions of an iconic hero and what it really costs him to keep saving a world that dismisses him. Written and produced by Anthony M. Caro.
The New 52 and Aquaman's Old Woes. The names, faces, places, and exact words change, but one thing remains commonplace in an oft-repeated scenario. A celebrity merely wants to have lunch or dinner in peace. However, things don't always play out peacefully. While aggressive fans may not behave out of malice, their autograph requests rudely disrupt dinners. Some do behave slightly maliciously, such as when a would-be influencer ignores a prominent person's quiet time and demands an interview or an on-camera statement. Years ago, bloggers were the top influencers of their day, and some bloggers' affronting behavior even targeted superheroes. In Aquaman #1, November 2011, the hero enters a seafood restaurant to order fish and chips, seeking something normal in an extraordinary life. He doesn't want to be Aquaman today. He wants to be Arthur Curry. But the costume and trident make that impossible and do little more than attract an obnoxious blogger who interrogates the hero while he tries to enjoy a simple meal. And the blogger goes there. He asks, how's it feel to be nobody's favorite superhero? The question stings. Why? It stings because there's more than a kernel of truth. While Aquaman surely is someone's favorite hero, he ranks low on the list of favorite heroes among DC Comics readers and fictitious fans in the comic books themselves. That's the hang-up writer Geoff Johns, penciler Ivan Rice, and inker Joe Prado examined in the 2011 New 52-inspired series Reboot. The fictional Aquaman's sensitivity to the question reveals his insecurities and feelings of unappreciation despite all his heroic deeds. The same applies to the publication history, a timeline revealing the ups and downs of a legendary but underappreciated hero. The storylines published over those years didn't touch on the hero's insecurities, which are fleshed out in Johns's and Rice's inaugural issue of Aquaman Volume 7. Aquaman's recent resurgence echoes a pattern that dates back to his 1941 debut. Unlike Wonder Woman, Aquaman is not iconic enough to draw audiences based on his name. The character, like other heroes in live-action films, benefited from the superhero film trend, particularly with Jason Momoa's casting driving interest. That worked for the first film, but the second faltered, with far lower box office receipts. What is the lesson here? Aquaman proves he has staying power, but he's not the main attraction, a conundrum that he's faced since his inception. Certainly, a character's appeal depends heavily on their creativity, and captivating Aquaman stories can significantly enhance interest, as in the 1990s. While the road to fame didn't prove overly challenging, Aquaman had to travel far more than 20,000 leagues to receive critical acclaim. This pattern of reliable but not stellar appeal traces back to Aquaman's earliest days in the comics, and the history highlights the dramatic under- and overtones on display in the 2011 relaunch. Aquaman in the Golden and Silver Ages. Superman started a pop culture phenomenon that elevated all comic book publishers by making the medium red-hot for kids and also for adults who like to sneak reads. DC Comics' Superman titles and overall line sold millions of copies monthly, as did Fawcett's Captain Marvel Adventures, which often led the industry. Timely Comics did not reach the heights of the other two, but Captain America Comics achieved exceptional sales, usually nearing 1 million copies per issue during the war years. Timely's anthology Marvel Mystery Comics had its own successful characters. Previously titled Marvel Comics, the first issue sold a surprising 800,000 copies on the strength of two popular characters, the Human Torch and Namor, the Submariner. Superficially, the Submariner was often described as Superman from beneath the sea, but the character had more depth than such a one-note description. He fit a general mold for comic publishers intending to meet market demands, and powerful characters from far-off lands sold well. Many traits set the Submariner apart from the last son of Krypton, namely his surly, distrustful, outside nature. As noted earlier, something more pronounced set him apart. He came from Atlantis, which tied his stories, mostly, to the sea. The setting helped connect the Submariner to a particular type of adventure story unique to him and his books. DC Comics tapped into undersea heroics with the original Aquaman's debut in More Fun Comics, number 73, November 1941. A character far different from the fleshed-out one fans would become accustomed to. In fairness, Aquaman shared space in the book with Dr. Fate, the Spectre, and others, limiting the page count for his debut. It appears getting him directly into an action-packed story, battling a Nazi U-boat targeting a refugee ship, took clear precedence over fleshing out a more coherent origin. Coherency in comics would still be a few decades away, and the whimsical origin yarn worked fine in the Golden Age. As for the original origin, after Aquaman's mother passed away, his father, a famous undersea explorer and scientist, became consumed by his work. He discovered the lost city of Atlantis and created a watertight environment with an unknown source of oxygen. There, he conducted experiments on his son, ultimately transforming him into a super-powered hero who can breathe underwater and communicate with the ocean's denizens, who come to his aid when beckoned. Aquaman had his fans, or else he would not continue to appear in More Fun Comics tales until issue 107, February 1946, before moving on to Adventure Comics number 103, April 1946, as his new monthly base. However, Aquaman never had a solo book during the Golden Age, and he appeared only once as a guest in another book, World's Finest Comics number 6, June 1942, which featured several DC heroes in short stories. The hero's publication history during the Golden Age reveals his worth to DC Comics, a quirky character shaking up anthology books with seafaring tales, but not one strong enough to carry his own series. Aquaman benefited from the extraordinarily high circulation of DC's anthology titles during the Golden Age, which kept him in front of a wide readership despite his backup status. The recognition factor would affect the character's multimedia prominence in the Silver Age. As the superhero genre evolved into the Silver Age, DC gave Aquaman a more fantastical foundation that better suited the era's mythological tone. The hero underwent a definitive reboot in Adventure Comics number 260, May 1959. Writer Robert Bernstein, penciler Ramona Fradon, and inker Sheldon Moldoff gave the character his more familiar origin, the son of a human lighthouse keeper and an Atlantean mother. In the new origin, after Aquaman stops a Navy submarine from detonating depth charges, the hero tries to explain his actions to the sub's commander by revealing his origin and his talents to communicate with sea life. The now revealed backstory is not the only secret Aquaman kept. In confidence, he tells the Navy commander he prevented the atomic warhead's underwater detonation because the legendary city of Atlantis actually exists and would have been destroyed. Aquaman saved many lives that day But he did it in a low-key way, unlike the more bombastic and public manner of Superman. Aquaman doesn't outwardly crave the spotlight like Superman, yet he is far from indifferent to recognition. Interestingly, Aquaman's Silver Age reboot is nothing cataclysmic. He tells the Navy commander his origin, as he did during his first Golden Age appearance. Other DC characters, major and supporting, had to rely on Aquaman's version as he related it to them. Was there a reboot, or did Arthur Curry originally spin a fictionalized version of his origin to hide his true Atlantean identity? If so, that would reveal much about his inner turmoil. As an Atlantean, Aquaman would not be seen as a human by the human race, even though he is half human. The Navy commander refers to Aquaman as the King of the Seven Seas, a prestigious title for sure, but one that separates him from humanity, whose home is on land. No amount of alternate timelines, complex universe resets, or soft reboots alters the fact that Aquaman is not entirely at home in either world, and his status as a minor hero underscores his outsider status. The Silver Age origin served as the basis for Aquaman's backstory through the Bronze Age and beyond, changing only slightly after Crisis on Infinite Earths, and Peter David's memorable run. Much of Aquaman's life and its discontents stay consistent even with the New 52 soft reboot. More the pity that the New 52 highlighted many of Aquaman's old problems. The New 52 and old hang-ups. Any discussion of Aquaman during the New 52 era must acknowledge the lingering impact of Crisis on Infinite Earths and other timeline-altering events such as Zero Hour, Infinite Crisis, and especially Flashpoint. With the New 52, the DC Universe underwent streamlining, placing the characters 5 or so years into their heroic careers. At least, that is what we see with events unfolding. What we cannot see are the vestiges of past timelines that exist deep in every character's psyche. For all we know, a subconscious, repressed memory of those past and alternative timelines may still exist, shaping personalities. The 2011 Aquaman reflects the spirit of earlier timelines, shaped by altered narratives that essentially share the same biography. The New 52 promised more than a mere reboot or streamlining of comics continuity. It served as a much-needed fresh start, re-establishing comic histories for new readers entering the comics fold thanks to the movies. Arthur Curry, Aquaman, may only have served humanity for a few short years, but he's been a part of many earth-saving team-ups. Therein lies something that surely nags at his soul. The New 52 version of Aquaman is the same as the old Aquaman. He's fought several seemingly minor battles by himself, and his main accomplishments come from being a supporting team player. It is hard for him to stand out as anyone's favorite superhero because he's never given a chance to shine, something cruelly driven home by the ignorant bloggers questioning. During the confrontational interview, we eavesdrop into an earlier, revamped timeline with a classic character, only to discover he's still carrying the baggage from multiverses and timelines that no longer exist, or do they? Tragically, revising, condensing, or modernizing timelines does nothing to erase the psychological baggage Arthur Curry Aquaman carries. No one can remove the painful history. It defines who the hero is. Aquaman Volume 7, Issue 1 begins with the cliched sequence of the superhero stopping a robbery committed by non-supervillain criminals. They've stolen an armored car and the cops are in hot pursuit. While the cops chase the armed robbers, Aquaman, trident in hand, stands in their way, blocking their path. In arrogant stock villain fashion, the crooks think they can run Aquaman over. We expect cliched stock villains to behave so dumbly. We don't expect the cops' reaction. Upon seeing the hero subdue the criminals, an officer asks, "What's Aquaman doing here? We're not in the ocean and I don't see any fish around." You would think he'd be thankful Aquaman wandered so far from the ocean. Routine public safety work is dangerous. Engaging in a high-speed chase with heavily armed and violent criminals willing to run over, that is, kill Aquaman, is extremely dangerous. No guarantees exist that the police officers will come out of the confrontation unscathed or even alive. Reckless driving by armed robbers fleeing law enforcement also increases the risks of innocent bystanders suffering harm. What is the first thing that pops into the mind of the cop in pursuit? Essentially, what is that weirdo B-grade hero doing here? What's he going to accomplish? Wonder Woman and Batman would never get that kind of reaction. Creators can revamp continuity all they want, but Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman will always command respect. However, Aquaman will always receive backhanded compliments or casual dismissals of his efforts. That's the way life is for a hero literally typecast by his origin. What do the police do after Aquaman easily apprehends the criminals with no loss of life? They ask the hero if he wants a glass of water. Now, a bulletproof hero should handle such insults easily, and Aquaman does by calmly saying no and exiting the scene. That's how the hero handles it externally. Internally, the insult bites hard. Why wouldn't it? Aquaman's only human. Actually, he's half human, half Atlantean, but condescension stings just as sharply in Atlantis or anywhere across the DC multiverse. Condescension is universally disrespectful and bites across timelines and multiverses. Aquaman remains a steeled and stoic hero. He's grown immune to such slights. Hasn't he? Aquaman's skin is bulletproof, not his pride. He can only consider the source for so long before it eats away at his soul, leaving him quietly questioning who he really is. That's what prompts him to go to a diner and order fish and chips. Dining and dismissals. Arthur Curry, the man of Aquaman, knows something more hurtful lingers behind the patronizing comments about his connection to the sea. He knows that humans only see him as a fish guy, an Atlantean, an other. Arthur Curry understands that people do not recognize him as a fellow human, or, in science fiction terms, as an earthling. Since Atlantis is part of the Earth, Atlanteans should be considered fellow humans. The Aquaman insults reflect the prejudices people feel safe expressing. He knows their prejudices run deep and will remain, regardless of how many times Arthur Curry saves humans from their own kind. So Arthur Curry does what a broken spirit will do. He seeks validation from those who will never give it. But the hero tries nonetheless to blend in with fellow humans by doing something normal people do. He goes to a local eatery like everyone else. He even orders fish and chips as a way to break the stereotypes about him, and as if to add an exclamation point that says, "See, I'm not who you think I am." Unfortunately, the plan doesn't work. Patrons and workers reel in shock when Aquaman walks into the eatery. They're stunned because he's picked a seafood restaurant, of all places. That's not what anyone expected, which is the point. Aquaman deliberately chose a seafood restaurant as a passive yet deliberate way to rebel and disprove the misconceptions about him. Even doing so with a small audience of local diner customers represents a small, defiant victory for the beleaguered hero. The casual, matter-of-fact ordering of fish and chips attempts to reveal that preconceived notions about Aquaman do not reflect who Arthur Curry is, although the hero assumes his nonchalance indicates a natural predilection for things that run counter to stereotypes about him. This doesn't hold because nothing he does is nonchalant. Instead, Aquaman's behavior comes across as forced and calculating, eliciting unwanted reactions. He's trying too hard and pays a price for his behavior. No, the price doesn't manifest in the form of a supervillain who enters the diner to challenge the hero. Instead, Aquaman's performative public behavior, including his highly performative food ordering, attracts the attention of the previously mentioned blogger. Aquaman wanted to draw attention, which he did, but not with the results he sought. When a diner emphatically states, "You can't order fish and chips," the hero casually replies, "Why not?" To which the nearby blogger says, "Because you talk to fish." Aquaman soon realizes that his performative stunt won't improve his day, and he becomes visibly annoyed. Reese's artwork highlights the anger on Aquaman's face, and it is anger and not mere annoyance. The hero drives his point further, directly stating, "I don't talk to fish." Aquaman becomes highly annoyed at the comment that he talks to fish, and Reese's artwork lets you easily read the hero's mind based on his facial expression. He's heard this comment before, and he's sick of it. Aquaman quickly corrects the record, informing the blogger that he doesn't talk to fish because their brains are too primitive. He doesn't talk to them. Aquaman uses a variant of hypnotic suggestion to push them to help him. What aggravates Aquaman most are the unspoken words. Superficially, it would seem that Aquaman controls fish and other aquatic life, but the hero admits he pushes them. He lacks dominion over them, so he cannot control them. What he can do is telepathically reach into their midbrains and guide their behavior. His fans don't see how sophisticated the process is. They simply see it as Aquaman conversing with fish who happily go along with his whims. They express such sentiments in a roundabout way, leaving their unspoken assessments silent. However, Aquaman hears what they passively think. He doesn't communicate with fish because he can do something incredibly sophisticated. Rather, he can talk to them on their level. He speaks primitive fish gibberish. In some hero fans' minds, Aquaman talks to aquatic life because he can dumb himself down enough to talk fish words. In short, he talks to fish the way an adult talks to a 3-month-old child. Since Aquaman's conversations with fish help him save the day, he likely practices the baby/fish talk in his free time, having mundane conversations about daily life under the sea with fish. Such impressions are ridiculous and incorrect. However, the false, ignorant perception exists, creating an impression that Aquaman's able to speak dumb fish talk, suggesting Aquaman can talk dumb, giving way to the unspoken assessment that Aquaman is dumb. No, not dumb in the non-intellectual way, but dumb in the popular cultural context. If someone doesn't like a movie, they may dismiss it by saying, "That movie is dumb." A television detective episode ends when the sleuth solves the mystery in an utterly preposterous way. The ending was dumb. A superhero who talks to fish? Aquaman is dumb. What a sincerely superficial assessment of a complex hero, dismissive, judgmental, persistent. The perceptions ignore a critical point about communication with fish. It saves lives. At times, Aquaman's chats with sharks, mantas, eels, and other creatures helped save all life on Earth. The ability to harness sea life to perform good deeds at critical times is hardly something to laugh at. While indeed an odd superpower, the results do speak for themselves. Are the fans listening, though? No, they seem only to see what they want to see while ignoring what is in front of their eyes, like the blood present on Aquaman's brow during the earlier skirmish with the armed robbers. Yes, bullets deflect off his chest. He doesn't flinch. but there's a trickle of blood from his forehead. If he's bleeding, we can assume he, unlike Superman, feels pain when the bullets sting. The blood and the pain underscore something critical about Aquaman. He's a living, breathing, feeling creature of the earth, whose home is sometimes the sea. Both his human and Atlantean sides feel physical and mental pain. The dismissive attitude toward his powers and existence must hurt him, but, like the impact of bullets, he won't show it. In an unguarded moment in a mundane diner, he does show his feelings. The blogger continues to press Aquaman with personal questions, and the hero maintains his composure, responding politely. When the blogger asks him why the hero chose a mundane diner for lunch, Aquaman reveals that his father took him there, opening the door to talk about his life when he was only a child and not a famous superhero. Aquaman now seems to appreciate the opportunity, and, truthfully, he may have set it up. As with Fish, Aquaman channels the midbrain of the interviewer in a somewhat sly way. By revealing that he and his father dined here, the hero's response seeks to guide the interviewer's questions. A true professional would ask obvious follow-up questions about his relationship with his father. His being Arthur Curry's, not the hero Aquaman. Likely, Aquaman, once merely Arthur Curry, accepts an opportunity to set the record straight about myths and misconceptions while giving the world a glimpse at the person behind the heroic myth. Perhaps he accepts an interview with the blogger because the true professionals in the major media aren't calling B-list heroes. Unfortunately, the blogger is not a true professional. He uses the opportunity to stress that the hero's father was human, to highlight that Aquaman's mother is Atlantean, and to be dismissive and derisive of Aquaman's status as the king of Atlantis. When asked, "How's it feel to be Aquaman?" Aquaman responds as if he doesn't like the tone. So the blogger elaborates in the worst way. He notes that the hero consistently serves as the punchline to comedians' jokes before asking the awful question, "How's it feel to be nobody's favorite hero?" Aquaman doesn't give a verbal answer. He bolts from the diner, leaving his fish and chips on the table, a symbolic abandonment of the normalcy he sought. He doesn't have to say the words. His anger is intense and unmistakable. While he does not reveal it overtly, we know how it feels. It hurts. Though titled The Trench Part 1, this issue isn't the first chapter in a story arc, as much as it is a prologue to one about the cannibalistic creatures living in the Marianas Trench that Aquaman and Mera will face to thanklessly save humanity once again. However, the trench beings don't appear in the story, except for a teaser at the tale's beginning and end. Issue 1's overall focus and action are thematic and character-driven, leading to a conclusion in which Aquaman returns to the shadow of the lighthouse where his father once worked. His thoughts drift to his father saying that someone must take responsibility for watching the shores. Aquaman, joined by Mera, then tells her that he renounces his role as King of Atlantis and will make a new life solely on the land with Mera. He's done with Atlantis, as king, visitor, or otherwise. Mera supports his decision, oblivious or willfully blind to its true gravity. Aquaman's rejection of Atlantis is a rejection of his Atlantean heritage. He rejects this heritage with the unspoken hope that doing so will lead land-dwelling humans to accept him. Humans don't work that way. Aquaman does not become overtaken by rage. Instead, he's swallowed by sadness, assuming the human world will never truly welcome him. So the hero opts for a desperate tactic. He gives up the throne of Atlantis in an attempt to discard his Atlantean heritage, in the hope that land dwellers will finally see him as human and more than an oddity who talks to fish. Ironically, Aquaman rejects the undersea world that welcomed him and made him their leader, while embracing the world that treated him as a joke. The quiet renunciation shows a hero accepting fate, if not defeat. How many times has he saved a world that he doesn't belong to and never received any thanks? He carries wounds others never see, choosing only to dismiss him as nobody's favorite. Is the solution to stop being Aquaman and live a life solely as Arthur Curry, land dweller? As the following chapters in The Trench play out, we learn the answer is no. Arthur Curry knows he plays a vital role in the human world. He saves it by land or by sea, and does so as Aquaman, whether he's anyone's favorite or not. At times, the only audience that matters is the audience of one.
Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode of Comic Book Ruminations. This is your host and essayist, Anthony M. Caro. And the first time I discovered Aquaman, that would be way back in the late 1970s with the Filmation animated cartoons. They were made in the 60s. Actually, it was Aquaman / Batman Hour, I believe that was the name for it. And it went into syndication, and I watched it on the old UHF channels in the late 70s. And those Filmation cartoons kind of disappeared from television, although you can catch them on YouTube. I would later become a big fan of DC Comics through the Super Friends, although quite honestly, the Super Friends was kind of a bit too, well, for lack of a better word, wimpy. They kind of toned down the fighting and confrontations that existed back in the late 60s. There were no villains on the Super Friends show, if you notice. That was kind of a standards and practices thing. That's another topic we'll get into on another day. I do want you to check out my webpage, Anthony M. Caro, where you can learn more about my other projects, and there'll be a comic book project, nonfiction essays coming down the road. We'll get more into that later. I also encourage you to check out my IMDb, where you can learn about some of my other projects, including film projects such as the upcoming Lost Media and Wolf Tracker films. So I don't want to talk too much about myself. I'd rather talk about comic books, and we will have some unique stuff coming up in the near future, continuing the trend of deep dives into classic comic books and classic comic book characters. I already have an idea for what I want to do for the next episode, but I'm not going to reveal that now. I do want to say that there is a new issue of Aquaman out, a new volume, and I will definitely try to do a review of volume 1, and I'm going to put that on our Facebook page, Comic Book Ruminations Facebook page. So please check that out and follow it. You can keep up to date on new and current and past news in the comic book world, comic book movies, television shows, streaming, whatever. I try to cover as much as I can within the time available. And I appreciate you making time available to listen to this podcast. It's been a blast. I'm going to call this season 2, starting with the Legends of the Dark Knight episode, because we've upgraded our production. And, some of those earlier episodes, they're a little bit crude, but hey, what do you want to do? I'm finding my way. First time doing a full podcast by myself. And again, thank you for listening. We'll have another episode up in a month. I kind of use a monthly schedule like the old comic books were released. So please, thank you so much for being a listener. Please subscribe, and I look forward to bringing you another hopefully thought-provoking, and even more hopefully entertaining episode for you next time. Thank you, and I will be back, and I hope you will be back too.